Hi design team. So for this next little video, I want to focus on the aspect of converting all your images for preparing to print in CMYK. In some cases, you'll want to prepare your artwork in RGB color space in Illustrator. Because of the different ways the blending modes work, for instance, soft light and hard light, and some of those blending modes are going to look kind of like crap in CMYK, but they really kind of show their qualities in RGB mode. And yet, when you want to get that over to CMYK and print prep for that, you're going to have to convert that RGB color somehow to CMYK space. And it's not enough to just go over here to color mode and switch it to CMYK, because for instance, if I did that to this document, I'm just doing it now you'll see just how crappy that looks. And this was a pretty complex image I built in Illustrator for broadband vision for Pivot, for the conference that they did when I was starting with Pivot, and I built this in layers. There's quite a bit of nested objects in here, and rendered out those icons in kind of low poly 3D models, and those are just floating on top, and then all of the background is a bunch of layers of vectors and some raster images overlapping each other. So I'm going to go back to RGB mode here, and I just want to walk you through preparing your graphics. Let's step out a little bit so we can see the whole thing. I'm going to grab this whole object. You'll basically just want to rasterize your image um, right here. But before I do that, I want to remind you to always check before you even go to print what your raster effects settings are. So your document raster effects settings are going to affect the way things like blurs, drop shadows, transparency elements, all what resolution they work at basically. You want to set this really low if you're working on huge graphics, large canvas sizes or artboard sizes for posters and things like that, because your raster effects like blurs and drop shadows are going to take a long time to render, especially if you have a lot of them in a document. And I use blurs pretty extensively for softening things and transitions. I've done a lot of it with Audix. They take a long time to render and even move a group of objects from one point to another. It bogs it down. So when I'm working in the file, I'll set it to 72, sometimes 50, or even less if it's huge trade show stuff. And that really helps speed up the display when I'm designing. But you have to, it all falls apart if you don't remember to set this to a higher setting when it goes to print. So if you are at actual size and you're doing large format, you might only need it at 72 dpi or 100. But if you're doing it quarter scale, for instance, you want to put it at a high 300 dpi. And then click OK and make sure that's set before you go to print, but also before you rasterize anything like this, because it's going to use those settings when it flattens this down to a raster image. So we'll go to rasterize here now, and it's in color mode RGB, and it's 300 dpi. You can set your resolution, and you can have a white or transparent background. We'll just say white. Unfortunately, it will add a whole pile of, it'll add a white document square for all of the object that's clipped inside of this rectangle. It won't clip that file to just the size of this rectangle. It'll include whatever's invisible in the clipped inside that clipping group. It'll just make it white though. So when this is done, we will see a flattened image, and that's what we're going to be able to take into something like Photoshop and convert it to CMYK there. So now it's a flat object. You'll see that the bounding box for this is set way out here in this white space, and it's just given it If you wanted bleed on that document, for instance, you just open up your clipping group, make it a little bit wider, and then flatten it. And now from here I'll go to unembed, and that'll save my file out. So I'll link it back in later, but I'll just unembed that. I'll put it somewhere like my desktop or downloads for now. Let's go to desktop. Save it there. And then I will place that back in here from my desktop. Now I have a placed file. Now if I switch to color mode, Cmyk, I'm in good shape. It's not going to change that much. Mind you, this is still a RGB document or raster image, and I should go into Photoshop and convert that to Cmyk first. When I do that, I recommend whenever you convert, keep your original RGB file intact, especially if you've been building a layered Photoshop document and doing all your effects and stuff in RGB color space. Save a flattened version as the same name of your file plus an underscore CMYK, just so you know that's for print. And that's a good way for all of us to kind of follow the same practice and pattern when we're getting things ready for print. Excuse me, I'm not going to bother going through with the conversion. You all know how to convert files. Let's go back here, stop this. So while we're here, I'll just might as well demonstrate a good example of where I want my blur effects. Would be for things like this, where I'm going to come into stylism and set my blur interactively here to be quite high. You're seeing now how long it's taken to render this out with as a high resolution thing. So if I want to kind of have some flare or glare, I'm making 3 copies of this, and I might make one bigger. You're seeing how long it's taking to resize this now. I just want you to get, an idea. And this is at regular 8.5 by 11 scale. This isn't particularly big, but at 300 dpi, these big soft blurs they're taking a while to calculate. So what's going to speed that up again, just to illustrate, is if I take this and I go to other maybe and make this 50. All of a sudden, those are just going to render a lot quicker. And when they're soft transitions, they don't really make that much difference. They don't have a big impact on the quality of the print when they're so soft. But I would still probably err on the side of caution and go to a higher resolution when it goes to print time. There may be other little things in there that you've forgotten that you are using raster effects on, and they happen to show up in print, and you'll be disappointed. So you'll see just now quick these pop around now, and it's a lot more responsive. Thank you guys. Enjoy.